I will just, Community Committee, and I will now formally declare the meeting open. Do I have apologies? Councillors Forsyth? Mayor Southgate may have to leave early. Councillor Pascoe. Is Councillor Leary with us?
Not currently.
Not currently. I understand we have an apology from Councillor... Yeah, we do have an apology from Councillor Leary at this point. She did inform me over the weekend. And Councillor Hamilton.
And I've just received one from Kesh.
And also obviously from Kesh Naidu Rolf, which would be understandable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we have 3 on Zoom. You might want to... Councillor Hamilton sent a very helpful message to say that he could be linked in if need be. Okay. Right. I move that the apologies be accepted. Seconded by Deputy Chair Wilson. All those to the contrary in favour. And I now move to the agenda, which of course is conducting hearings into the Public Places Policy Review. Councillor Wilson moves and Councillor Bunting, I understand, is seconding that agenda. All those in favour, those contrary, carried. Declaration of interest, I'm told they're not required. However, I will just put that out there. I'm not aware that there is any issue there. We now move to trading and public places hearings and engagement report. Sandra Murray. If you just give us a quick précis and then we'll obviously go to our first witness.
Excellent. Good morning, councillors. Yes, the Trading in Public Places policy went out for public consultation. This followed from targeted consultation that we had done earlier to refine the options for public consultation. The majority of we had, in the end, we end up with 87 submitters and then 3 additional ones that came in after the report had been written, so a total of 90 submissions. The majority of submitters preferred changing to the proposed policy, and then there were 3 different maps for the restricted area, and the majority of submitters preferred option 3. I'll take questions from there.
Questions? Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, when you say the majority preferred option 3, I think I read 43%. Was it the highest percentage of submitters?
Yes, so there's 2 parts of it. The options were 3 of the options proposed policy changes. So those were things such as that the name of the policy would be changed. So a majority of submitters preferred that there was a change. I think it was 88% in total for that change. Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up it on my screen now. And then there was a majority of submitters preferred option 3. And again, sorry, I just don't have the. Every time I close my computer, everything disappears. Do you have a? Oh, you got a paper copy for me. Thank you. See, paper works.
And there was hours of operation, and I guess where I'm heading with it is the. If you wouldn't mind, if you'd indulge me, Mr. Chair, that could you just go over very clearly where the maps are for each option, because that seems to be the bone of contention with a lot of people in there. So just so we know what we're doing before we hear the.
So the 3 map options were to keep the current area, which is from. Oh, the map's really small. Do you know the street names?
There's option 1, basically, isn't it?
I actually. Yep, thanks, Calvin.
From Knox Street to.
It's from Knox Street to. Do you know
London
these?
Street.
To London Street. Knox Street to London Street.
If I may. Morning, everyone. Option 1, which is our current one, which is the area bounded by Knox Street, Anglesey Street, London Street and Victoria Street. That was option 1.
Right. And yeah, that's right, it didn't go down to the river, did it?
No, it doesn't go down to the river.
Right.
Option 2 was the same area, but with it being extended down to the river. Option 3 was the extension from the bridges, that's between the Claudelands Bridge, along the river to Anzac Bridge and back along Anglesey Street. And there was an option 4, which was just a retaining of the status quo.
Okay. So, I asked you a question out in the foyer actually regards what happens if you are trading outside of the restricted area. So, in essence, at the moment, the restricted area doesn't include Victoria on the River and Embassy Park. So, in essence, it's a little bit more permissive to not be a part of this policy, is that right?
Correct.
Right, great, thank you. I'm clear now.
Right, thank
Ready to
you.
go. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we are expecting,
Thanks. Sarah's got one.
sorry, Councillor
What do we-
Thompson, we're still waiting for our submitters. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. Did you, was there any, I guess, correlation or trend when you're looking at the types of organisations that were choosing the different options? I see gourmet in the garden. Like, and what comments were there in terms of actual location? Because it looked like there weren't a lot of comments, in detailing why they chose those different options.
Yeah, the comments seem to be pretty much split amongst people, between people who wanted more vibrancy in the central city and people who simply were saying we don't want the competition in the central city area. And there didn't seem to be a consistent split in views. So I wouldn't say that food businesses were all against it or anything like that. The views were quite varied, and there was didn't seem to be any real difference between individuals and organisations in those views. So I didn't pick up any trends, even though there was a good number of submitters. The trends really seemed to fall between people who wanted more competition, more vibrancy, more options, and people who were like, no, we need to protect the businesses that are already there. That really seemed to be the only split.
Okay. And in terms of comments around, we've got 3 different areas where it gradually gets more extensive in terms of that definition or boundary. Were there any really specific comments like, we need to include this area or we should exclude this area? I saw one around the ferry bank being, and a comment that maybe people should have more freedom to have food trucks down there. But were there any other ones that you noted?
People made comments around the area either in that they thought that extending the restricted area would lead to an
Councillor Wilson, you're in the chair.
increased level of to an increased level of vibrancy, and that it encouraged more events. To be honest, some of the comments I felt were a little confused. I think that some submitters were not entirely clear that the map area we were talking about was a restricted area. And sometimes they would make contradictory statements even within their own statement. So what I generally felt was that for the people who were supporting the extension in the restricted zone, is that they seemed to think that that would lead to more events happening in that area, and that would lead to more vibrancy. Rather than, but there was a number of submitters that I actually ended up ringing up and clarifying their point, because they were so contradictory in what they were saying that it wasn't clear. Then there were others where I couldn't be sure if they fully understood, but it seemed clear enough, so a little bit of uncertainty.
In terms of our option 3, as I understand it, that was the preferred, we indicated that we were looking at option 3 as the preferred outcome.
We didn't indicate any preferred map option. We just provided the status quo and 3 alternative map options. But option 3, 48% of people came
Ah,
back.
right, okay, so that's the trend through a submission process.
Through the submission
just
process.
Just under half who submitted
Yep,
were in favour of that.
yep. Yeah, the next highest was option 1, which was to keep the existing
Yeah,
map area.
Thank you. Yeah.
is that right? Question from Mayor Paula.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Just in terms of those people who were, or on either side, either opposed or thought it might bring more vibrancy, did they give any other ideas about how you would avoid the competition with existing businesses, or was that pretty silent? For example, I'm thinking that you wouldn't put a kebab outside a kebab shop or within a certain vicinity. Did anybody have any ideas about that? So that there was some direct competition with a type of food?
The options that we provided were all in relation to food trucks being in the restricted areas for events. Some submitters, however, did say that they thought there should be no restrictions, no restricted area, that food trucks and mobile shops should be allowed to operate anywhere. There was some people who felt that they should not be allowed to operate anywhere at all. And there was, again, sort of, there was some, at the very end of the report, I have a few of the additional suggestions there. For example, to pilot with option 2, and then if that goes well, extend it out to option 3. So, you know, first of all, just take the existing area down to the river, and then if that's going well, then extend it up between the 2 bridges. To make the central city restrictions citywide, so that no food trucks would be allowed to operate anywhere other than in a market. And a lot of people talked about how they wanted more events, and that they wanted the food trucks at the events, but they wanted there to be more events where the food trucks would be. So yeah, there was no trend in any of those ideas.
Yeah, so I'm interested in exploring that further because people wanted events where the trucks where the events are going to be, but as a city council we have a clear view that events should be, you know, bringing vibrancy to certain parts of the CBD. So I'm just wondering how we get to that point where we can be a bit more nuanced instead of just thinking, oh, we need areas, can there be other criteria? And I was hoping that maybe other people would come up with some helpful suggestions about criteria as opposed to just geography.
I think that there was a great deal of concern from some submitters about the impact of the current economic situation on existing businesses. And it might be that formalising the ability for food trucks to be present at events and gathering data around how that goes and whether that, the extent to which that does impact businesses. And then it might enable sort of future submitters or your sort of future businesses to understand whether they are a threat or not. I think that the issue here is that there actually isn't a great deal of research on whether food trucks do genuinely threaten existing businesses or whether they can be advantageous. And without that information to be able to say, well, actually, no, it hasn't caused a problem elsewhere, people can have fears because they don't have information. So it might be that a sort of staged change where, first of all, we let them in with events and we sort of have a look about how does that actually impact people, and then we have next, you know, at the next policy cycle we have a look again. Okay, well, can we, you know, move it a bit more? Is there something else we can do to make them come in and be more vibrant? But to do it in a way that does not seem like a large step that is threatening for existing businesses.
I just note we now have with us Melissa Renwick of Hospitality New Zealand. It would be my intention to invite Melissa to join us and welcome. I'm not sure where you've had to come from. Is it Hamilton, Auckland, Wellington today?
Hamilton.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, sorry, apologies. It's just, you know, obviously because you represent the national body, but Melissa, please, you know, highlight the main points of your submission and give us time for questioning. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, look, I guess the outset, the first point I'd like to make around this and to our submission is simply that we are, as an industry, in support of anything that we can do to help enhance the CBD, enhance the wider district, and of course then ultimately enhance the business to our members. What I suppose from the outset, we're in support of many of the changes, and in fact have said that we would like to support the third option, so in support of the changes proposed, but just with that wider area. And one of the key reasons, I guess, that we wanted to go across this is a number of our members have got concerns around the level playing field, I suppose, that food trucks have against the restaurants or against the bricks and mortar businesses, and that was the basis of predominantly the feedback that I got from our members when discussing this. There is absolutely no doubt we would all like to see a number of events, food trucks as part of those events coming to the city. I think we're all in agreement. We've all been to an event that has added to, the food trucks definitely add to that vibrancy. They're another draw card to get people to the city. And as a package, it runs really lovely. It's a really nice experience. But what I suppose we're very conscious of is not allowing this change in policy to allow for food trucks to become the event of themselves. What we've seen in districts around the country is that when that's the case, and when it becomes a regular event particularly, that's when we start seeing that impact to the members' businesses. So, for example, we're talking night markets, we're talking a regular dining event in the city, for example, where the event itself is built around food trucks. If the event is supplemented by food trucks, then there was no hesitation from all the members I spoke to. They were in full support of that. And I guess that's just the key thing that we would like, if there's any way within the policy to just stipulate that definition, then obviously that would make my members extremely happy. But yeah, the other thing I guess is just around that level playing field piece is that food trucks, generally speaking, and this is quite a generalisation, is that they are operated by a lot of people who will run them in the weekends or in the evenings, for example, and they do have other full-time paid employment, whereas business owners, obviously, the business is it. And so the level playing field around how they operate with commercial rates and rents, how they, the commercial water usage, even bathroom facilities and music fees, those sorts of things were some of the things that kept coming up when talking to members, just around how do we ensure that food trucks have got that level playing field. And I suppose just that's where their majority of their concern came from, was that if they did get this opportunity to come in on a regular basis where the event was all about them, that becomes an unfair predicament to the members. So that was the key thing. But in general, yes, we were definitely in support of the changes, in support of the highlighting of food truck as a different trading shop, and that certainly the events, food trucks can be there as long as the event is in operation. So yeah, in a nutshell, support, but just with a small caveat. That's all.
Thank you. I have a question from questions from Councillor Bunting, and then Her Worship the Mayor. Your hand is still up, Mayor Paula?
No, sorry.
All right, sorry. Councillor Bunting.
Well, hi, Mel.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for your submission. Appreciate that. And I understand while you were coming up with this, you had some really big meetings.
We did.
And some findings from the food truck people themselves were really interesting.
Yes, we did. So we had a number of, within our members' meetings, we had representatives from the food truck community come along, and that was critical to me because I think it was important that we are all in the same industry for starters, and we do all need to work side by side. So it's understanding their points alongside our own. And the key thing, what I found of interest from them was that the food trucks themselves weren't really interested in coming to the city, in a one or two off basis. They also wanted to come in that event capacity. Right. Generally speaking, I think they were saying that if we come on our own, we're not necessarily, that's not enough of a draw card to bring people to them. But if there's something that's surrounding it, then that becomes a completely different proposition. So that was certainly the key thing when it came to, in some places you'll see there are specific parks for food trucks in cities, and they can rotate in and out. The feedback from a couple of places and the food truck guys themselves were that becomes quite logistically difficult to organise all of that. And so in general that they were
pretty much on the same board as us, which was, should we say unusual, but
Yeah.
we were all in agreement in essence that that's the best way to proceed is in that event space.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's around marketing. You know, as an operator also as well as a representative here, that's the biggest part for the business is really understanding how do we get people in our doors?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the scared piece comes from other operators is what if we lose the people we're really fighting for?
Right.
So whereas if an event in itself brings people that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise come to town in the first place, and so we're all going to capitalise from that.
Yeah.
So that's that's a win-win for everybody.
So I get that the bricks and mortar argument. I saw that a lot, and
Yep.
and the rates, etc. But just want to talk about the compliance just briefly.
Yes.
To your knowledge, are the compliance regulations the same for a food truck as they are for a restaurant?
No. So, well, yes, in the sense that everybody needs to supply a food safety plan and work through the Food Act rules. But what the issues are around food trucks historically have presented is that, so where we will operate in a fully compliant licensed kitchen, all our members, food trucks, their truck is licensed, but where they actually do the preparation is up for discussion, I suppose is the nice way of saying it. So whether that's actually happening in the truck, as it should be, they can highlight a separate venue. So for example, a school kitchen that they might go and do their preparation in. The reality as to whether that happens or whether it's a domestic kitchen would be debatable.
There's nothing to stop them doing it.
Correct.
Okay, right, cool.
And certainly from a fees perspective, it's a different, I suppose, it's different from a bricks and mortar store in the sense of the level of fee that we pay versus what the truck pays.
Right, so I might ask for some more information later on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Matt.
Councillor Wilson? And then Deputy Mayor Taylor. Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming along today. Sorry, have I jumped in front of you, Councillor Sarah? I reserve my seat for my...
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you're so young, you can wait. Thanks for the information you've given. I'm particularly interested in food waste and rubbish, I guess, that a food truck has to manage.
Yes.
In a licensed and highly regulated restaurant, I know it's quite robust, and I know it's very arduous. It's highly regulated, and I guess we get some good health outcomes as a result. What can you provide me in terms of what obligations does a food truck have for disposal of their waste, and any information about the immediate waste debris that may come from containers, etc., plates that food is served on in the sort of temporary?
Absolutely. Look, from the outset, the food trucks themselves aren't my members, so I can't speak to how they operate generally. But from what I understand, I can certainly say, so the responsibility when an event is run lies with the event manager to ensure that waste is dealt with. There, as far as I'm aware, there's no regulation around the use of bioware or anything sort of environmentally sustainable. So the trucks themselves can use whatever type of packaging suits them. The disposal of the waste from an event or from just them dining, what have you, once it leaves the truck, as far as I understand, and I could well and truly be happily proven wrong, but it is up to the consumer. There isn't any responsibility as such on the truck itself to ensure.
Right. And how does the truck get rid of their own rubbish? They can dump it?
Very good question, because they're not in a situation like an outlet where we have to put in, certain commercial bins and that sort of thing. One would assume domestic waste, because if they're not running out of a commercial venue. Don't get me wrong, there are a couple of food trucks in the city. Barn Me is a prime example that are running entirely out of their restaurant kitchen, so they are complying in all aspects. But certainly those that don't have a home base as such, a restaurant base. Yeah, very good question. I couldn't tell you.
Thank you.
I now go to Deputy Mayor Taylor, then Councillor Thompson. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And Melissa, thanks for your very thoughtful and balanced submission. I'm just picking up on the point you made about a distinction between events created for food trucks and ones where the food trucks kind of supplement the event. I think that's what we were saying. So at the moment, is it possible for an event to be organised basically around food trucks?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and so it's not tied to anything else, but it's actually, so are you saying you would, you want us to try and address that, your members want us to try and address that so that they can't be, an event can't be organised specifically for food trucks?
Correct, yeah, that's exactly it. Is that if there is some way within the policy that can be written in that it is, the event itself can't be within the CBD area, can't be food truck driven, it can't be a night market, it can't be another, a dining event as such, and rather that they're as a supplement to a different type of entertainment, that's exactly what we would like to see.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor
So
Tom.
that would come down to the event criteria, I suppose. We'd actually apply for the events.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely.
I might be, I'll tease it out with staff a bit later on, just how we might look at that. Thanks, Melissa.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Melissa, for your submission. I'm interested in the research that you've done because we don't have research here in Hamilton, as far as I'm aware, around the impact of food trucks on other restaurants and businesses. So can you tell me a little bit more about Rotorua and Paihia,
Sure.
which you've referenced?
So they came from other branch reports that we have from the organisation, and specifically were drawn out actually for a similar submission made in Whangarei. The Rotorua Night Market, we spent quite a bit of time talking with the president and of that branch around how they felt things were impacted, I suppose, by the setup of what they had. They had a regular weekly night market down in Rotorua. And so we spoke from the reporting that the branch then took in from both dine-in and takeaway stores was significant losses. Initially, interestingly, when it was tourism driven, the city was tourism driven, it wasn't such an impact on the existing businesses because whilst the takeaway stores still felt a downturn, generally people were in town for the night. So they saw a downturn from some of their local purchases. So residents, for example, perhaps didn't come in because there were too many people around. But the tourists were still there. So they would still go into the pubs, they'd still go into the restaurants and things for a drink, even if they'd eaten with the night market. After the borders were closed, and subsequently since the night market has started, all stores have seen a significant downturn, where local residents are now going to the night market because that obviously is the entertainment in itself, and not going to the stores at all because they're going in to get a quick bite to eat and then go home again, rather than being out for a night's entertainment across the board. And I guess from our perspective, I was likening Hamilton to that situation because obviously we don't have, well, still no one has the tourists, but even then we don't have that significant same number of tourists that Rotorua does. And so I think that second scenario is exactly what we would experience here if we were to set up, and again, that's an event that is purely food truck and vendor driven. And that's one of the reasons why I guess we were very wanted to stipulate if it was possible to have that restriction. Yeah.
And is there, for example, we've got Gourmet in the Gardens, or there's often, I don't know if it's the event held over Gourmet in the Garage or something, held over at Clauden's. Do you have similar concerns around those events, or is it largely Central City?
So I can speak from my own personal experience in that instant. When Gourmet in the Gardens is on, we do see a downturn on a Sunday afternoon in business from our store's perspective. From the members' perspective, that has been the general theme that everybody has spoken to. But at the same time, because it is in a specific location away from the city, it becomes a destination event. And yes, it's keeping people away. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I suppose, having a certain number of those events that are in existence and are operating well is something that I suppose the members can cope with. What they're more concerned about is that if people are out on the footpath and they're walking through town and there's an alternative for them, then they're going to instinctively go for that rather than the other stores. Whereas I suppose the other stores aren't being threatened as such because they're not surrounded in the gardens. That's not to say we'd like to see a whole load of gourmet in the gardens popping up around the city on different days of the week, but certainly we respect that that's a long-standing market and it has its own catchment, I suppose.
Okay, all right. And last question is just, as, for example, the population within the city centre increases and we see more people in general going out to eat and things, would you still be wanting to have that restriction, or would you see that then it's adding
I see exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I think we have got a bit of catching up to do. We've definitely have an oversupply of stores in the city, and I think that's something as the population increases, we need to see those businesses sustainable long term and I suppose get the benefit from having those additional residents. So for the time being, I guess in review, whenever it's up for review again, it could be looked at, but certainly for the next few years, we would see that the restriction remains, certainly whilst that population builds and the restaurants have a chance of getting a lot of traction back. Obviously, we're talking about this post-COVID world, but things are considerably different, and certainly with the lack of, there's still a considerable lack of workers in the city. I think it would be fair to see those operators that have held on reap the benefits of having additional people in the city before we layer another threat of competition on top. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just ask a question then and go to you. The sort of the balance of just, you know, when you talk about the food truck driven, and obviously your message presumably is the criteria for a special event is crucial in terms of council giving that permit, and obviously there'll be a relationship presumably with the in the CBD case with our relationship with the Hamilton Central Business Association. Sure. I'm just trying to work through, if you see what I mean, because I guess that your message is just make sure the criteria stacks.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess we have that opportunity for when the permit request comes through to review the intent of the event. And I suppose that's what our members are asking for, is just that it's not, that it's looked at and seen, okay, are people going to be coming for all sorts of entertainment and not just for something that's going to draw away from those businesses.
And figure you've travelled, but as you do, you go around the world, particularly Germany. I find fascinating where the central square, like our garden place, one day can have a fair playground thing, another day it's a farmer's market, whatever, sort of constantly changing. What is that balance, you know, between regularity of events, you know, and, you know, some cities in the world do have a sort of markets that have been happening since 400
Absolutely.
Years, literally.
Yep.
But where does that balance sit?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of it actually, and it passes back to the previous comment, is that a lot of that is population driven, and in order to find that balance between the stores that are here and something that's going to pull people in, a farmer's market, for example, is and a fair, as the two examples you use, I guess, are examples of where I suppose those businesses have been developed around those events because they're in existence. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's not that the event has come in after. Yeah, those events have been going. Largely, businesses have established themselves and probably have a proposition to the customer that is suited to those events and things that come through. So it would take some significant shift of thinking, I think, for some of the members, which is not to say that's a bad thing, but in this environment, I don't think it's the right time to ask them to do that.
And just a final question, you mentioned obviously Rotorua, you know, the COVID with no external foreign, you know, tourists as such. Anecdotally, what's the sort of the kind of the scene in Hamilton?
So yeah, the night market itself is causing significant issue to the members down there because people are coming into the city for that market, grabbing a bite to it on their way home from work, and then
domestic, basically just domestic
only. Yeah, so it's resident based. That largely the people that are coming to that market. So therefore, they're not ordering their takeout. They're not going to the restaurants from. Right. Yeah.
And I take it your other theme is, given the current situation of disposable income.
Yep.
Then the hospitality industry is extremely sensitive to any economic.
Yes, exactly. So our members have had to pivot a lot to go with the changing rules as people have around the world and around the country. And I think the key thing is just layering anything else on top of that right now would be one step too much for them. So I think if we can, that's why I say if these events are designed with the intent of bringing vibrancy and increasing foot traffic to the city, fantastic. Those food-driven events I keep referring to, they're the ones that are going to be, in our opinion, the more threat to our members' businesses. Yeah.
Sure. Final question from Councillor Bunting.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks again, Melissa, and thanks for the extra question. Hey, in context with the COVID world and everybody's behaviours changing, etc., what's actually a bigger threat to you? Is it food trucks or the likes of Uber Eats and the online businesses and the ghost restaurants and the likes? Because it's a massive change.
It is a big change, and a very interesting question. So for business operators, part of my role within Hospitalities New Zealand is to go around and speak to our business owners, our members owners, and see how are they placed, what's their sales mix like, how is life looking in this environment, and check in with them on using some of those platforms. So Uber Eats is an interesting one. Widely, everybody knows now their commission rate is extremely high. Generally speaking, you're looking around 30% of an item price is what they'll take in their commission. When you are operating as a business and your fixed costs remain, so you have chefs on the premises, you have the power on, you've got, all those things are happening. As a supplementary income, Uber Eats and some of those other platforms can operate really good when viewed and only viewed as a supplementary income. And the likes of some of those higher levels where we were restricted to just takeaways, a lot of restaurants ditched them because it was costing, so it was eating far too much into the margin. But if things are already in operation, I guess, like I say, it's a good supplement to business. But that's, I guess, ensuring that our members are getting the business model right around those. So there's definitely a place for them. Look, the food trucks from, I guess that's where it comes back to my point around regular events, is that those events where we're bringing things in, once a month, once a fortnight, whatever it is, into the city and creating this great atmosphere, I mean, that's only going to add to the environment. If we're looking at basically setting up a whole load of businesses right outside your doorstep on a regular basis, then that, I think, becomes a significant threat for that day's trade. Those online spaces, yes, whilst it's taking a good chunk of the money in commission, if it's operated correctly, it can operate quite well.
Right.
But again, that comes down to the business owner's acumen and using it in the right way to support their business rather than letting it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get a clear picture of is what affects a full CBD more. And I'm not trying to put one against the other or be provocative.
They are different, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to get or trying to understand is the restaurant business as simple as people coming into town, eating and going home, or is it more affected now by people staying at home and ordering at home? There's
been definite trends that yes, people are. It's interesting because in the pre-COVID and just after, people definitely were staying at home, right? Because everyone was a bit uncertain, and prior to that, life was just too busy. COVID has done something very interesting in that it has offered a chance for a lot of people to reset and realise that they do want to be out and about and enjoy the experiences that can be offered in our city's restaurants and bars that perhaps they realised all of a sudden they missed when they couldn't have it. So in some aspects of it, there has definitely been a resurgence for some outlets. Yep. And now I think we're seeing a business model shift for a lot of stores where there is that balance between those takeaway platforms, a restaurant's own takeaway platform, and of course dine-in. So that's just become that's a change in model, a change in business model. But there is a place for all of it, just as there is a place for events. But on the same basis, yes, if you threw a garden place full of food trucks into the mix, that would be a bigger threat to that day's turnover than the takeaway commission. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for the comprehensive written submission and your verbal, and also the interaction with us. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I thank you for joining us. I now want to welcome Iman, who's going to join us, and obviously we're in your hands, sir. and obviously summarise and bullet point the main points of your submission contribution, then enable us to be able to ask some questions. Thank you.
So this is a hard act to follow because I'm the exact opposite. It's mostly opinion from someone that is a citizen, a performer, and I do also run a business where I do attend events, not as a food marketer, but I sell men's grooming products and other little craft things. And the CBD, I've been in Hamilton since I was 12, was going okay, and it stopped being a place to go when we had the base and we had charcoal and what have you. And it's a beautiful spot, but it's very underutilized. Now, I'm not here sort of to say it needs to be food trucks or not food trucks, but the CBD definitely needs more happening in it. And as a punter that does enjoy going and doing the street food thing, it's very different to going and sitting and eating in a restaurant. The idea is to grab something and then just walk around and see what's happening. It's a different outing, let's say, especially if the event doesn't have seating, which a real street market generally doesn't actually have seating. From where I've seen around the world, it's you kind of grab your food and you peruse the city. And from the perspective that I'm coming from, it is as a marketer of non-food items, but also as a performer that just wants to see more things happening in the city. The feeling is we have the infrastructure, but we don't have. So, we've got the cool little stages, we've got Victoria on the river, there's a lot of little nooks that we can put things on, but how we access them as creators doesn't seem to be sort of obvious to us. And from the perspective of just, say, food events, I understand competing, it would be threatening to restaurants and what have you, and doing like a weekly event. I can see that being a legitimate threat, but having a big sort of blanket ban, when we do want to run something special, when event organizers, they charge everybody, but where they make their money to actually run the event is from food people. So you guys don't have an easy job. This is just the perspective of someone down here just voicing concerns. So, yeah, that's my piece.
Thank you very much for your input. Do we have any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Iman, for your presentation. I am interested, you said that, so you do performances, or you're in the creative arts sector. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you see then the food trucks and these events working together? And you mentioned that you struggled also to kind of, there were difficulties with securing spaces or barriers. Can you?
Yeah, it's the space is there. You see the little Victoria on the river. You see the rotunda. I remember when I was younger, I drove past. Parents were driving past, and there's something happening there. But I've never seen anything in that rotunda since I've become an adult. Perhaps it is a lack of effort on our part to find, how do you do it other than just show up and just do something? There's sort of an imposition of red tape that you just sort of feel when trying to sort of get in there. As far as the relationship with food trucks and these events, generally an event organizer wants to get as many different businesses involved to offset the cost of organizing it. Now, I haven't been on that stick to something that scale, but me as a performer, we used to have the creators, they were running something down in Victoria on the river and in the old Browsers building, and that sort of evaporated. I'm not sure why, but they had a little PA set up and they had a band playing while the market was going on. So I'm not sure exactly what do you need to have food vendors in order for these events to go on? I don't.
So it's like a chicken and egg situation,
Yeah.
you're kind of saying. So you might come as a performer because there's already a market, or in the and the other situation would be you bring in the food trucks because you're wanting to perform.
Yeah, it depends on what sort of event people want to put on. And I'm not sure what the best version of this policy would actually be. But it's just my coming here is to sort of say, we want to see more things happening in the CBD. Hamilton has profoundly low self-esteem and the rest of the country shit talks it. Pardon my language, all right? But the only thing that this place lacks that, say, Tauranga and Wellington, what have you, don't have is quicker access to the beach. But otherwise, we have cool little nooks where things can go on. We have people that are creative and like to do things. And I just don't feel that it's fostered much. And that's not your responsibility, but just consider how you guys can make it less threatening to put those things on, to make it a little bit easier. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. So I'm really getting a clear idea now. Thank you. You sort of are of any option as long as it makes it easier to generate. So you've chosen one out of the four. Number one being the one that seems to be the easiest to operate.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Great.
if I've understood it correctly.
Yeah. There's a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, thank you very much. If there are no questions from Zoom, they are remote.
Yeah.
No. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time, effort and trouble to come in and
My
share
pleasure.
your views and experiences.
Yes.
It's been most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys later.
Right. What I intend, I'm being advised by our governance team that the other submitters have declined their opportunity to come in and appear before us, but obviously their submissions are on our written record, which you've obviously gone through. What I intend to do is go round, starting with Deputy Chair Wilson, and then just go round the room and then round Zoom land as well. Councillor Wilson, do you have, and this is obviously the kind of things we'd want our staff team to be addressing in the report that actually in this case is actually coming to council, isn't it, because of timing. Normally it would go to Councillor Bunting's committee, but in this case it's going via council because of some timeline issues. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to add. I think I am leaning towards option 2 being the soundest option, but I'm interested to hear from my colleagues. But that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting thing. I was all for option 3, but the more I read about it, the tougher it will be to operate. Like, for example, Victoria on the River and Embassy Park at the moment are 2 areas where food trucks can go. Is that right, Sandra? They can go, and they actually pose more of a threat to the local restaurants because they're not events-based than would happen if we did extend it out to those areas. So it's kind of a flip. I'm really interested in finding out, though, more about what Melissa was talking about with regards the food preparation compliance. Can they just prepare food anywhere and then bring it to a truck and sell it? Because the truck has to comply. I just would like to know a little bit more about that, because that might be a little bit of a hole in our process at the moment. And I'm trying to articulate this in the staff thing. You might be able to help me, Mr. Chair. It's just I'm thinking more about we're talking about commuter parking zones in the outskirts, which would be a great place for a coffee wagon. But if so it will encourage you to park out there, grab a coffee and walk into town. But my worry is now if we go with option 3 and extend it into those commuter zones, they can't put a coffee wagon there unless there's an event on. So it actually tightens it up a little bit. So can you make that clearer for me? Is that right? So that's basically right, isn't it? So at the moment, if you were parked down Grantham Street, someone could set up a coffee wagon down there without an event on. But with the new compliance, they can't, unless there's
Correct.
the Great Grantham Street Coffee Festival or something.
Yep. So option 3 would be the most restricted option.
Right, interesting. Whereas, I kind of saw it as the most encouraging as well at the same time.
Yeah.
Man, I'm down betwixt and between. Yeah. Okay, thank you for making things easier. That's all I got. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Sandra, my first question is, it would be good to dig in a little bit more into those confused submissions, because I wonder if that muddies the waters in terms of the information we're being presented around, 80-something% of people think this, 40-something want option 3, and whether some of the people that actually wanted option 3 didn't actually want option 3. And, it would be good to just understand how much that changes the numbers in terms of responses. Another thing I'm interested in, someone made a comment in their submission around different costs that the brick and mortar businesses have to pay that food trucks don't. And one of them was paying for outdoor dining. And I'm interested in actually how much that costs. It's maybe slightly out of scope. You might know, Calvin?
I can answer that now for you.
Yes.
Outdoor dining currently is $25 per table and chairs for a year.
Okay.
And that's for a table and 4 chairs, but that's based on size. And it's $125 for a year for a mobile shop or a food truck. Sorry, we've always used mobile shops. Now we're creating food truck as a separate entity within that. There is another question as to whether or not what would be the most appropriate fee structure for those food trucks. Should it be the same as a mobile shop, which was more, might be selling flowers or something from the side of the road, or should it be the same, or should it be at a different rate?
Okay. Thank you. It would be interesting to know if that detracts from people putting, having outdoor dining in any way. It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but that would be good to know since we're talking about vibrancy. Another thing was, like Mark, I'm interested in how... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to... Currently within the central city, if you're talking about outdoor dining, currently we have a prohibition on food trucks being in there, so there is no competition currently in the central city in terms of outdoor dining.
Yes. Oh, no, I was just meaning in terms of the outdoor dining, putting chairs and tables out onto the footpath or into Garden Place or something. So that fee there for the tables and chairs, I was just clarifying that. The $25 a table, that's probably another discussion outside of this anyway. Another thing was looking into that idea of markets based on food versus events or markets where food is incidental to it. I'd be quite interested in hearing maybe from from the creative community on their thoughts around that, whether they would see that as enabling them to do performances and stuff, or if it would make it whether it would be a greater barrier to them. So some comments from the creative sector maybe.
Just with that, if you wanted that engagement with the creative community, we would probably not be able to get to the 8th of December council meeting.
Oh, it is very soon. Okay. Yes, I'm not going to propose holding things up, so.
I can try to identify some key people in the creative community and have a phone conversation
Probably just
with
Creative Waikato or something,
Yep,
as a conduit. Yeah. So And also some options around what that could look like in terms of, because I imagine actually defining that could be pretty difficult. So, you know, where do you actually draw a line would be, or how do you, differentiate between those types of events? Sorry, final question, promise. Tell me if any of this is way too much work, and I'll filter some. Sorry.
I'll do my best.
The other thing was just I was hearing about, you know, places already operating outside of the current restrictive area, and what impact. It would be good to know what impact we're going to have on existing mobile businesses who are already well established if we do this area, because I don't know if we actually heard from any of them or if they didn't know the submission process was open, or...
We met with the Food Truck Collective, and they provided quite a lot of...
Right.
So they've actually both existing food truck operators and mobile shop operators and people who were interested in setting one up have fed into the process.
Yep.
So we've had quite a lot of feedback from them.
Okay, and they were comfortable with all of the... What was their feedback? Because I was surprised that they didn't come...
I can pull out their specific feedback and do a section on what...
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that would be perfect. Thank you, that is all.
Right, Councillor Van Oosten?
Golly, is there anything left, Sarah? Look, I think the only thing that...
No, don't extend the...
Really, the only thing that wasn't covered is, and I agree with Councillor Barntang around the food compliance, but also the waste compliance as well, and how we might be able to encourage good practice and zero waste through the permitting process, and whether that's an option for us to explore.
It certainly is, but I just pick up on the point, I think Melissa made the point in her presentation quite well, that actually currently when we're having food trucks in the central city, we can't have them in the central city. If there is an event, the event promoter is responsible for waste. And so it's probably just making sure we're not targeting food trucks as being this, when in actual fact, under a permitting regime, as it currently stands, and it's open to change that if you see fit, but under our current permitting arrangements, that would be the responsibility of the event promoter to take care of that.
And if I can add to that, there is the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, which has a section on event waste, and as part of the rollout of new services, the bylaw, the new Waste Management and Minimisation bylaw that was adopted in 2019, there's progress being made on new event requirements and support and resourcing to help events become zero waste. So there's actually a whole piece of work going on there to support events becoming zero waste, which is why having food trucks at an event is the best way to ensure that the waste issues are managed. Food trucks outside of events, you can put permitting requirements on, but there are enforcement issues. It's much harder to ensure that the waste from food trucks is managed according to the waste plan if they're not in an event. I can detail those.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful, and it'd be good to be able to see that, and I think customers want that. I empathise with the confusion that may have come through there, because it's something that I also was temporarily confused and had to go back to the original scope. So having an understanding about the conflict between the option that people chose and the intent in their wording would be really helpful in order to be able to clearly understand their real intention about that, because it seemed to suggest that growing the area was better, where in fact it was more restrictive, and so that would be good to understand. It saddens me to hear that we are sometimes hard to to deal with in terms of events and organising that Eamon talked about, and that sometimes it's hard. And so it's probably outside of this scope, but having some attention to being a little bit more simpler, templated more than rule-based could help. Comment?
Look, there is a significant portion on our website around the whole thing with events. We have an event manager who is able to meet with anyone who wishes to consider an event. There are template forms in there. They are tick boxes to be able to get through the permitting regime. I'm not saying how much easier we can make that or change. We can always be looking to review it and refine it and make it better. But I would hate to think that we didn't actually have something already on our website which was available, and we do make the opportunity through the events marketing team to in fact engage with anyone who's wishing to put on, hold or promote an event, and look at what they need to do and how we can help them to get there.
Thank you. So maybe that's just around comms and people having an understanding that just because we're big, we're not hard to deal with. Yeah. Kia ora. Thank you,
Right,
Chair.
thank you. Before I return to the Deputy Chair's question, I now go to those who are with us via the Zoom. First of all, Mangai Thompson Evans.
Thank you, Chair. It was quite interesting reading through all of the submissions, and while option 3 came up, actually option 2 seemed quite viable, and lots of people talked about it even as a pilot or proceeding going to option 3. There were a few submissions that talked about restaurants, cafes, places, thinking of new ways that they could adapt under the circumstances. There was one that talked about perhaps bringing food outside, rather than just the cafe style seating, but perhaps even cooking the food outside, just as a way to adapt, be outside the scope of what we are looking at. But is there any comment? I can hear your voice, Calvin. We can't see you though.
Sorry, I got a bit lost there with, sorry, Te Pura, as to what the question was at the end there.
Yeah. So the question was, which may be out of the scope of the report, innovative ways for restaurateurs to adapt to changing times. Could they come outside with their food cooking? Could they be more masterful outside the bricks and the mortar?
Look, there is always opportunity to have some discussions to look at what that might be. I wouldn't rule anything off the table, but I'm not sitting here making huge promises either. But we'd certainly be willing to have a conversation. We do have a couple of provisions within the bylaw that allows for some other opportunities if we wanted to explore those. But they are probably looked more upon as being a one-off or an irregular event rather than this is now how we do our business. Yeah, yeah. Is that, I'm sure that answers your question or not?
Yes, no, actually that does answer my question, because there seems to be a lot of concern around actual events. But if there was, if we had the food trucks along, and is there a kind of a levelling of the playing field where restaurateurs could had the same opportunity to be outside as well? That answers my question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We now go to Mayor Southgate, who will be followed by Mangai Te Ua. Mayor Southgate. Take your glasses. Oh, yeah, that is you. Sorry, I didn't recognise you.
That's me, but I'm actually in the car just about to drive off because I've got another.
Yeah, sure.
appointment.
Understood. I think we'll come back. Can I suggest if staff contact Mayor South, we can't hear you. I'm going to suggest staff contact your office directly so that you can feed in your questions directly one-on-one. Have I? No, we can't hear. No. No.
Okay.
Lose contact, cut the mayor off. No, so what we'll do is, I'll just note that obviously, if I can ask staff to contact Paula directly, because we understand there's some physical, I suggest we go to, if we...
Sorry?
We can't hear you, so we're actually going to cut you off, but a member of staff is going to contact your office directly.
Okay.
All right?
Fine, now she's back in the car.
Can you Okay, cool.
You right? Yeah, right. Mangai tu ua.
Thanks, Chair Martin, my apologies.
Very rare that I can cut the mayor off, but I'll take that opportunity. Mangai tu ua.
I have no further information requests and just having empathy for the bricks and mortar business owners who are operating in a really hard post-COVID-19 hospitality environment.
Okay, thank you. Right, Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I'm grappling with this, grappling with which zones are best, etc. I don't feel I've quite had a conclusive steer back from submitters, probably because there's been some confusion. And you know what, I think I'm leading to a question of staff here, but I've done a bit of an 180 on this. I think in the past I've been really liberal about it and with a sort of anything goes attitude and encourage vibrancy and spontaneity. But I think post-COVID, I'm much more aware of the pressure on bars and restaurants and cafes, as Ollie has just referred to, and I'm leaning towards being a lot more conservative now. And how can we ensure that what we decide here is not going to threaten hospitality businesses? That has become the most important factor to me at the moment. We mustn't threaten their business. So the concerns I've had from hospo businesses out in the community have tended to be allayed a little when they realise it's tied to events. And the submission that Melissa made talked about the nature of those events. So I would like to just see us explore how we can ensure, if there's a will, or how would we ensure that events are being created not for food trucks, but they're events where food trucks come and supplement what's already there. I liked what Tupora raised about how do we encourage existing businesses to be able to be more flexible and adaptable. How can we work with them to help them prosper by doing things in different ways? Maybe there's things we can do differently as a council to help. But it's probably not something that staff can come back to me. So anyway, that's my thinking at the moment. Probably the nature of those events is something I would just like a little bit more clarification on how that could be safeguarded, how we could easily bring in a criteria for events to do that. But other than that, yeah, that's my thinking. Thank you.
Before I go to back to Councillor Bunting, I just re-emphasise I think the last number of submissions around in the current economic climate, and where we say COVID is one thing, because at the moment we are, touch wood, at level 1, but in a flash we could for 3 or 4 weeks go to level 2, 3. You know, this is not a fix. This is where, you know, we're in a sweet lucky spot in a sense. But I just want some of the narrative to do some of that working with the Hospitality and CBD Association, other groups, the economic indicators, you know, because obviously I think, and then obviously just remind us when it comes to council when this policy would be normally reviewed again, and whether or not there should be an earlier review so we constantly are tracking, you know, those factors. And then I just want to emphasise too, you know, the robust thing around events and taking the certain point that the event in the current circumstance must be motivated by an event where, I think as Deputy Mayor and others said, a food truck may be a complement for a specific purpose, but it's not, you know, if we're going to make a choice, then obviously I would assume that we would be choosing our restaurants and bars and cafes who are fixed and have all the overheads and have made a significant capital investment in our city and carry in the current climate, you know, extremely high risk. Because, you know, we take level 1 for granted, but, you know, luck of the draw to a degree. Okay, Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I just want to, I do have an idea, which I just need a wee bit of work around from staff, but just speaking about the events that Jeff brought up, and I totally agree with him on that, that actually already is in here, isn't it? In like I was looking at point 13, bullet point 3, permits food trucks to operate in the central city only as a part of an event or market. The only wording we're missing is that they're not allowed to be the event. Is that right?
We can look, yeah, we can certainly look at whether just wording that to, we'd need to go through legal obviously as to whether we can word it in such a way to say as long as it is not an event focused on food trucks or
okay.
something along those.
So it's not in there at the moment.
It's not in there at the moment, but we'll go and have a look at.
Yeah, I think you've got general consensus that, you know, everyone seems quite focused on that. But the other interesting thing I had was, I brought up that point about coffee trucks and the likes getting swept up in this, out in the outer zones or, you know, the more walkable zones. Is there a possibility that we could set it up so that if you do have a cafe or a coffee store near those areas, you have a zone in which no similar mobile unit is allowed to operate? Another bricks and mortar is to set up next door, but is there a protection we can provide our food outlets like that?
You could, but it's then you have a compliance responsibility that sits around that. Now we have, I don't know, 48, 49 different mobile shops that are currently permitted that operate at various places across the. We used to be that you couldn't be within 200 metres of a in an earlier iteration of the policy, and we used to get daily complaints from one cafe owner about an individual coffee cart that was sometimes between 150 and 215 metres of the premise, depending on what park was available. It became, yes, we can do it. We accept and will accept that there is some compliance activity, and there will be some additional time being required to be spent for that. I just envisage that if what you are talking about, there was the likelihood of there being some competitive natures of that.
I guess I need help, but what I'm trying to set up is a system whereby existing businesses who have put faith in the central city are protected, and anything else we add around it actually supplements their business and helps them at the same time, so in a very positive way, rather than to comply everybody out of existence, as it were. But
The way the policy is proposed at the moment, a coffee cart would not allowed to be in the restricted area unless it was part of an event or market.
yeah, that's the trouble.
And for outside that, when I looked at international examples of that happening, they talked about problems such as, you know, if there was a good spot that they were allowed to park, you get people sending a car out at 4 a.m. to hold the spot, and then you get conflict between the coffee carts as to who got there first, and you're always here and it's not fair, I can't get in, and you get sort of a lot of this behaviour start to occur where it just becomes challenging to enforce because there's a limited number of good spots that they're all fighting they're fighting over. So there's all of those sort of wider issues that start to occur with that sort of model. And yes, you can do it, but it adds to the enforcement burden.
Yeah, look, I just want to be able to get a good coffee without having to walk too far if I'm a commuter truck parker. You know, and it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I took away from some of the commentary around the table was that there was option 2 took on some greater consideration, and if option 2 that wouldn't have the same limitations that you're talking about, Councillor.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
Thanks, Martin.
That's it. Is, one final question, Councillor Van Esten.
Thank you, and I'll make it really brief. Melissa, when you were presenting, you talked about the possibility for a trial, and I wonder whether that might be something we could explore a little bit further. It would also give us the opportunity to be able to get some feedback from different interest groups, to be also able to put together some statistics potentially about the impacts of such a change, and then perhaps review in a reasonable time frame whether we would want to go ahead with a more permanent option, and whether that's something that we can consider as a way of being able to make a robust decision based on actual statistics rather than anecdotal or fears. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Right, we have now a recommendation. This is the process that the Hearings and Engagement Committee receives a report, has heard and considered the verbal submissions on the review of the public places policy community engagement that took place from the 1st of October to 12th of November 2020. We have a minute note that the staff are going to go directly to the Mayor, given the, technological difficulties she had to be heard. So obviously that's, it's a given that she'll be included. And we note that the deliberation report will be presented to the council meeting on the 8th of December 2020 for consideration and decision. I don't think there's anything else we need to add to that. I will put that, seconded by Deputy Chair Wilson. All those in favour will say aye. Those to the contrary will say no. The ayes have it, carried unanimously. We now conclude this section of the hearings process, and also again thank you very much to our submitters who came. Thank you very much, Melissa, for being with us today. Thank you.